All right, thanks everyone for coming. Today we are having Dr. Kim Novick from Indiana University talk about her experience applying for awards and possibly some insights from helping judge as well. Kim, feel free to get started.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm happy to be here, and thanks to the Biogeosciences DEI committee for organizing this very interesting series of webinars. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of like a holistic view on crafting the nomination package. So my experience is informed from what I know about being an award nominee, but much more so about service on, in particular, the Thomas Hilker Award Committee, which I've served on for the last 3 years. Typically, I think that seminar was advertised with the fact that I was awarded that particular award in 2019, and then it's common once you receive an award to be asked to serve on the committee, and so I'm happy to do that. It's been a real pleasure to read those nominations and learn about all the excellent work that's being done out there. I've also participated in crafting nominations for others, so that's really where much of this this is coming from. So we're just gonna, it's 6 things. Here's an outline for the talk. Just to make sure everybody's on the same page about the different kinds of awards that you can pursue through AGU. We'll start there. We'll talk about how to decide which award is right for a given nominee. We'll talk a little bit about the nomination package itself. Spend a bit more time on the composition of the nomination team. Talk a little bit about the function of the letters, and then what to do if you are not successful with your first attempt. Okay, I think this will take 15 or 20 minutes, and then hopefully it'll seed questions. Though I am happy to have this be more of a dialogue than, you know, one-way transmission of information. So if you've got a question, please feel free to interrupt me during the presentation. You can just unmute yourself, but I'll also try to keep an eye on the chat box, or maybe Sam can also be helpful there. I definitely don't mind being interrupted.
Sure.
So let's start here. So there's really kind of 3 different kinds of honors that you might consider nominating somebody for within AGU. There are the section awards. So this is a list of all the different sections within AGU. We're here probably because we have an interest in the biogeosciences, but many of us may also find that we have connections to other sections like atmospheric science, global environmental change, and hydrology. Nearly all of these sections have an early career award, probably not all, but nearly all. And many have more senior level or mid-career lectureships and awards too. And some even have awards specifically focused on activities around service and education and outreach. Okay. So keeping in mind who's organizing the event, let's take a quick look at the awards within the biogeosciences section. There are 2 awards. The first is the Saltzman Award for Scientific Excellence through Education and Mentoring. So you can read sort of the award description here, but this is really recognizing outstanding mentoring of the next generation of scientists. They used to be limited to females, but that is no longer the case. I think this was the first year that the sort of gender requirement was removed. And then there's the Thomas Hilker Early Career Award. Both of these are memorial awards. This one was instituted in memoriam of a young scientist, Thomas Hilker, who unfortunately passed away at a relatively young age a few years ago. He worked in remote sensing and in particular sort of near surface remote sensing of canopy dynamics, as I recall. Anyways, this one is in recognition of unusually creative work by an early career scientist. And so one quick note here is that most AGU awards consider somebody to be early career if they're within 10 years of their PhD. So that means that for this award cycle, which had applications due in the spring of 2022, if you received your PhD in 2012 or any time thereafter, you would have been considered early career. But it is also important to note that exceptions exist for family leaves, medical leaves, and also now COVID. So you can, in a nomination letter, make the case that a particular nominee should be granted an extension to their quote unquote early career timeline. Okay. The Biogeosciences lectures also includes 2 lectures for more senior level or mid-career scientists. The Carl Sagan lecture has a focus on astrobiology, and then the Rieberg lectures focus more on global biogeochemistry and marine geochemistry. Okay. You may find that particularly if you go to sort of the section award pages and look at who has received awards in the past, you will find that many that we probably consider to be part of the biogeosciences community have also received awards from other sections, right? We tend to do cross-disciplinary work, very objective-oriented work. And so it makes a lot of sense that the work that we do as biogeoscientists has sort of an overlapping Venn diagram with the work done by global environmental change scientists and frequently also hydrologic scientists. Okay, so there are a variety of options out there. And when you're thinking about perhaps nominating an outstanding earlier career scientist for a section award, I would suggest that you go see who has received these awards in the past, and that might help you expand sort of your perspective on which awards they are eligible for. Moving on to the union awards, these are union-wide, so apply to all sections of AGU. They tend to be very competitive, and it's just something to keep in mind. Some of the ones that we often see, that we can often see or can expect to see biogeoscientists nominated for include the McLean Medal, which is one of the most competitive awards given by AGU for early career scientists. The Joanne Simpson Medal is a mid-career award. The Eunice Foote Medal for Earth Life Science, I believe, was new this year, given to an exceptional senior scientist for creative achievements at the intersection of Earth and Life Sciences. And then Roger Revelle Medal for recognition of outstanding contributions across a broad set of sort of earth science disciplines. And then the Excellence in Earth and Space Science Education Award has seen a few award winners from the biogeosciences in recent years, including Dave Moore, who won in 2019 for his work to organize Flux Course. And a few years before that, Jim Erlinger and Thune Serling for their work to organize ISOCamp. Okay. And then finally, there are AGU Fellow nominations, which are different than the AGU awards or union awards. There's typically a large class of fellows admitted each year, including multiple fellows from each different section. These are senior level scientists, and as you can see from the criteria, demonstrate quote unquote scientific eminence. Okay. So now that we have an overview of the landscape, how do you decide, well, where you want to nominate somebody for an award? How do you decide which one might be right for them? So as you're thinking about that, just a few things to keep in mind. You should definitely read the eligibility criteria carefully, as that may answer the question for you as to whether somebody is eligible for a particular award or not. You need to keep in mind that these awards are competitive. They're competitive at the section level and very competitive at the union level, right? So you need to be able to make a case that the person you're nominating is doing impactful, outstanding work and making signature contributions to the field, okay? And if it would be hard to make that case, then maybe you wait a year or two until it becomes easier, and then consider nominating them then. You know, if you're aiming for a section award, you know, the section in which the particular scientist you want to nominate most often presents when they attend AGU is a pretty good hint as to which is the right section. But again, check those lists of prior recipients across a range of sections, because that can be really informative. This is really important. You can simultaneously nominate someone for more than one award. I know for a fact that the same person was nominated for at least 2 section awards this year. It is also possible to simultaneously nominate someone from early career section award and early career and the McLean Award, for example. So a couple of years ago, Kelly Wrighton won both the McLean Medal and the Hilker Award. Okay, so you can certainly nominate somebody for more than one award at the same time. And just a reminder again that eligibility criteria, particularly for those early career awards, are a little bit flexible. You just have to make the case in the nomination letter as to why the eligibility period should be extended. And if you have any questions or you're not sure, lean on your networks, right? Ask your mentors and your colleagues or prior recipients of the award if this might be a good opportunity for somebody you're thinking of nominating. And also don't hesitate to reach out to the leadership of a particular section or the union itself. Okay. Next, the nomination package. I think this has been the topic of some previous webinars, so I'm going to do this quickly. What I did is I pulled out the sort of elements that must be a part of the Hilker Award nomination, which are really quite similar to most other awards. There must be a nomination letter that outlines how the nominee meets the selection criteria. Okay, and this should really make the case for why this particular person is doing outstanding work, making signature and clear impacts on the field, right? And it should sort of cover kind of all of the important bases. There needs to be a CV for the nominee that has fairly clear page limits. I think it's 2 pages. I'll have to double check. Don't quote me on that. But you should not submit candidates, 15-page CV. We are really looking for a short version that does not include bibliography. So this comes in separately, but the bibliography needs to be formatted to clearly state the total number and types of publications, including how many were published in AGU journals. And then finally, at least 2 or up to 3 additional letters of support. I recommend 3 from folks who can speak about a particular aspect of the candidate's research program, or can make a particularly compelling case for the impact of the nominee's work. Which brings us to the nomination team. And so this is really, I think, the crux of a successful nomination is the letters. Okay, the record has to be there in the CV and in the publications, but the truth is that, again, these are competitive awards, and most of the nominees have really just amazing and fun to fun to see records of productivity and impact, right? Everybody's well over the bar in terms of sort of the numbers, right? So what you need from the nomination team are people who can write letters that can provide context to what we see in the CV, that can make it so clear how this candidate is driving the field forward, and that can tell stories and narratives about the candidate's work that you cannot see from the CV. Okay. So when it comes to forming the nominating team, which should include somebody to sign the nominating letter, and then those 3 additional letter writers, there's actually a diversity of approaches as to how this can happen. Sometimes the person that writes the nomination letter is really steering the ship. They are also soliciting the other letters of support and are the ones that are piecing together the CV and bibliography, right? Sometimes, and it should be noted that usually the nomination letter in particular tends to be signed by a relatively senior scientist. Sometimes more early career scientists can help to pull together the package, for example, by reaching out to and lining up the other letter writers, formatting CVs and bibliographies, and even sort of ghostwriting the nomination letter, right? Which somebody else might look over and edit and then sign. In both of these cases, the nominee likely does not know they are being put up for the award. And as if you would like to consider yourself to be a potential nominee, you can make this process much easier for your potential nominators by making sure that you have up-to-date CVs accessible on the web somehow and easy to find, right? Because there is some work here because the CVs have to be in particular formats. And so you can make it easy on future potential nominators by making that information available. And we'll say that there are other iterations of this process. Sometimes the nominee knows that they are being nominated and can supply, in particular, templates for the CV and the bibliography, and any other fodder that might be useful for the nomination team when crafting the letter. And it is even also the case that sometimes nominees will ask others directly to nominate them. Okay, I've seen all of these things happen. And there are trade-offs, right? Personally, I think it's kind of nice if it's a surprise. And also because these are so competitive, that the odds of success are kind of low, and we have so much unavoidable rejection in our work to begin with, that, if we can spare somebody some unnecessary rejection, maybe that's a good thing. So I'm sort of in favor of the first two approaches, but you should definitely know that the others happen sometimes. Okay, moving along. Oops. All right. So generally speaking, the people writing the letters should be probably predominated by mid-career and senior scientists, though again, early career scientists can help to draft the letters. And usually the nominator has to be an AGU member, and it's helpful if the team is sort of predominated by AGU members. The people writing these letters should have enough experience working with the nominee to be able to write an enthusiastic, detailed, and personal reflection on the nominee's accomplishments. Okay, maybe there's a temptation to reach out to a quote unquote big name in the field and ask them to provide a letter of support for your nomination package, and that's a great idea if quote unquote big name has a good relationship with the nominee, but it will not be a valuable contribution if the letter writer cannot get excited about telling the story of how this nominee's work is pushing the field forward. That's what you're looking for in your letter writers, big fans of the person you are trying to nominate. There are some restrictions. So PhD and postdoc advisors are prohibited from being lead nominators, though after a period of time, they can write supporting letters. There are also restrictions on the extent to which members of the award review committees can participate in crafting nomination packages, which is something that you could, if you're serving on one of these committees, you could talk about with the committee chair. And also committee members will have to recuse themselves for discussion of nominees with which they have a COI, conflict of interest, which I think includes co-authoring publications within the last 3 years. So that's just something to keep in mind. I mean, usually the composition of these review committees is anonymous. I already told you I've been on the Hilker Award for 3 years, but that was my choice. But if you know that a particular person is on the committee, don't necessarily think that will help you. In fact, they cannot be there when the discussion unfolds. Okay. All right. So with that, I want to talk a little bit more about the form and function of the letters. So I think, we've said this a few times, but the nomination letter and the supporting letters really need to emphasize the nominee's signature contributions to the field. After reading these letters, the committee members that are evaluating the nomination should be able to answer the question, what is this nominee known for? In what ways are they advancing the field forward, right? So a nomination letter that just, rehashes information that's available on the CV that says, oh, this person has published 300 papers and blah, 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 grant money and blah, 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 is actually not going to allow the committee members to answer the question, what is the signature contributions of the candidate to the field? So that's what these letters need to do. Particularly in some cases, the letters are explicitly requested that the letters discuss the nominee's stature relative to their career stage. And all the letters should speak about the impact of the nominee's work, right? It's not only is the nominee producing a good record of publications, but those publications are influencing the direction of the field, right? Can the letter writers identify specific ways that their own work or the work of the people they know has been inspired by the research or activities of the nominee? If the nominee includes substantial leadership, those should be described in ways that highlight the success or the impacts of the initiatives that they are leading. Impacts on teaching and mentoring should be included in the nomination letter and the supporting letters. If the candidate does a high amount of service to the profession or service to the university or outreach work, this should be discussed again in terms of its impact. And efforts to build diversity, equity, and inclusion are very important and should be addressed in the nomination package. Okay. I want to make a note on the H index. When you think about impact, certainly citations to papers is one way to describe impact. But there's perhaps a viewpoint out there that one's H index is also a good indicator of impact. And the message here is that you should think about discussing the candidate's H index with a lot of caution, because this is really a metric that tends to integrate over all of the biases that can amplify or suppress the publication records and overall trajectory of certain demographics and in certain fields over others, right? So this is a bias metric. So for example, in the Hilker Award committee for the past couple of years, we have not discussed the nominees' H indexes at all. It has not come up in our conversations. And if you look at the Fellows nomination page, you'll find this interesting note about the H index, which used to be a required element of nomination packages, but is now optional. It states that the H index is one potential indicator of scientific merit, but should not be a major deciding factor. And if you're using the H index in a nomination package, be clear about where it came from, and that you should be careful and compare it only within the same scientific discipline. To which I would add, you should also be careful about how its relevance may change in time. So to use the example from my own field, I work within, the Flux community. A lot of my work interacts with networks like Ameriflux and FluxNet. Until recently, the deal was with Ameriflux that if you shared Flux Tower data, anybody that wanted to use it had to invite you to co-author their paper. It was a good deal, and it resulted in a very large number of papers with a very large author teams that definitely drove up the H indexes of scientists that shared data in the early days of these networks. This is now changing. Most Ameriflux data is now CC BY4, but it's just something to keep in mind, that you cannot even use these as a comparable metric within a field, as what influenced them can change over time. Okay. And then be careful about unintentional bias in the letters that you are writing or help to write. So there is a lot of research that shows that letters of recommendation across all professional stages in academia tend to reflect biases that disadvantage women and people of color. And if you want to learn more about that, I recommend a Google search for bias in letters of recommendation, and all sorts of stuff will pop up. But there are some ways that you can actively work to minimize this bias. You can emphasize accomplishment and skills over things like work ethic and personality traits. So research shows repeatedly that letters for white men are much more likely to emphasize accomplishment and skills, while letters for other candidates tend to use words like hardworking or dedicated, right? Focus on the accomplishment, focus on the skills, use all the available space. Letters tend to be shorter for women and people of color. So make sure that that is not the case in the letters that you write. Keep the letters professional, avoid mentioning aspects of personal life. And when I write letters like this, I use formal titles and surnames. So every time I mention the candidate by name, it is Dr. So-and-so, right? And then finally, you can work to be aware of your own biases. And there is, at least I have a link here, AGU put together a few years ago, a presentation on implicit bias, which is sort of required reading and viewing for folks that serve on the review committees for these awards. But at least this 2016 version is freely accessible, and it's easy to click through it and understand some of the ways that implicit bias can percolate into decisions like who should be nominated for and receive awards. And recognizing those is the easiest way to work to minimize it. So the last thing is holdover nomination. So again, these awards are competitive, so the odds that you're successful with a nomination on the first try are low. So what do you do if you weren't successful? Sometimes the committees will make an explicit recommendation about whether or not to resubmit your nomination. If resubmission is encouraged, then you should definitely resubmit. And that is the committee saying, yes, we want to see this nomination again. Even if it's not, however, you may resubmit the nomination, though here is where I might advise a little pause to ask yourself, okay, is this really the right award for this nominee? Might there be other awards and other sections that are more appropriate, and or is this the right time to resubmit this nominee's application, or is there some advantage to waiting a year or two before trying again? Okay, so that's what I had. I tried to summarize a few things here, but I'm happy just to open it up to the questions for the rest of our time together, if there are any. And I'm going to go ahead and actually stop the share. And I'm going to encourage you all, to the extent that you want to turn on your video, and we can have sort of a more intimate chat that way. So